along with us on this three-part journey. So last week we kicked things off with getting you into supervisor mindset, talking about delegating fairly and successfully, and about HR being your friend and ally. Next week, we'll be looking at improving your communication skills, talking about those roadblocks to effective communication and feedback strategies. But this week, we're really going to dive into how we can work better with each other and looking at those unique qualities of ourselves and of others. So we'll be talking about personalities, we'll be talking about emotional intelligence, and how those two concepts tie together. Before we get started here, just a couple of things. First of all, our disclosure is on the screen. We are offering nurse contact hours for today's presentation. Successful completion includes attending or watching the webinar and completing the evaluation. So you do need to complete that evaluation at the end of today's session. It will pop up when you close out the webinar. It will also be emailed to you. So please fill that out. Even if you're not looking for contact hours, we can send you a certificate, and we do really value that evaluation. So please give your inputs. Let us know what else you're looking for around this topic and how we can improve what we're doing for you. So there is no conflict of interest for this activity, and ICANN is an approved provider of nursing continuing professional development by the Ohio Nurses Association. This program is also supported by the HRSA grant and the Flex grant dollars that go to ICANN. So that's noted on your screen as well. We're also giving away an Amazon gift card. So a lot of you have chatted in already. That's fantastic. Liz is going to be asking you to chat in as well during the presentation. So we'll be watching those and drawing those at the end of today's program. We're also recording today's program, so if you have other people in your facility who are looking to attend today's session but weren't able to join live, you can share that recorded link with them. So at this time, I'm so pleased to introduce to you and welcome Liz Swanson. Liz works in our professional education division here at ICANN and is really passionate about developing good programs for rural health providers. She's always been extremely interested in the topic of personalities and how personalities impact our work teams. She's also done extensive work on emotional intelligence and how to adopt those strategies into the workplace. So Liz, welcome today, and I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Well, thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that wonderful introduction, and thank you all for being on. And before we really get started, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is a crazy time in your hospitals to really focus in and look at those supervisor skills and look at those opportunities for growth. So I'm just really delighted. I thank you so much for the work that you're doing in your hospitals, and we really appreciate everything you do. And we here at Professional Education Services are just proud to be able to support you in any way that we can. So with that, we're going to get started, and just kind of as a recap, I wanted to talk for just a minute about those critical qualities all successful supervisors must possess. I think that we know that no one is born a great supervisor. You become a great supervisor by developing skills, by honing those skills, and really working on your leadership skills. So these were the skills that we thought were the most important attributes of a successful supervisor. And in one way or another, we're going to be going over those in this three-part series. But I thought I would just talk about each of these skills for just a moment. And the first one is really to have a positive attitude. And great leaders know that happy and motivated teams have to have happy and motivated leaders. And some of those skills that Kimmy taught us last week about the rock star drinks, the lottery tickets, the candy, snacks, those types of things, those go a long way towards having a positive attitude for your whole team. Confidence. Confidence is important because people will be looking to you. You are the supervisor, and they're going to be looking at how you act. And having that air of confidence is an important part of being a successful supervisor. And along with that, a sense of humor. Your team is going to be looking to see how you react in difficult situations. And being able to have a sense of humor and sometimes laugh off those things is certainly important. And learn to laugh at yourself. I think that is a key skill, no matter whether you're a supervisor or in any relationship that you're in. The ability to embrace failure, because honestly, we know that not everything is going to work out. There's, no matter how much we try to avoid it, failures are going to happen. And your team is going to be looking to you to see how you embrace the failure. And, do a root cause analysis, find out why it failed, look at that failure, but the ability to embrace it as a learning opportunity is a key skill for any supervisor. Listening to feedback and great communication with your team, that's easier said than done. I think we all know that communication is one of those things that is extremely hard. Kathy is going to be spending a lot of time next week really focusing on that communication skills and feedback. Knowing how and when to delegate. Kimmy talked about that last week. And delegating isn't just to get the work off of your back, it's to give your team and those that you supervise a chance to shine and a chance to grow their skills. And then really having that growth mindset, looking at your organization from growth opportunities, looking at your staff from, how can they grow in their positions. So I just thought it was important that before we dug into the personality and into the emotional intelligence, that we looked at those key skills for a great supervisor. So now we're going to talk about personality, and I love to talk about personality. We've done this presentation several times for nurse preceptors, for leadership series, and I really always find it very interesting to talk about personalities. Go ahead and chat in your personality letters. I love to see what the group has. I don't know, Kathy, if you could kind of tell me what most people are chatting in. I put my letters up in full disclosure. I am an ENFP. Probably not many of those that are on the call today, but that's my personality type. So really, we're going to be looking at, what is personality? These are our skills we're going to build on. We're going to recognize the unique contributions of each personality, describe how understanding personality types provide a framework to better appreciate differences in human behavior. So really, what is personality? I found this really good definition, in the Handbook of Personality Theory and Research. It says, personality traits are the relatively enduring patterns of thought, feelings, and behaviors that distinguish individuals from one another. So it's the way that we're hardwired, the way that we feel, the way that we think that distinguishes us from someone else. So Kathy, do you have kind of a poll of some of the personality types? Let's see, maybe I can see.
Just kind of looking here, Liz.
Oh, I see several ENTJs and ENFJs.
It looks like a nice combination. ISFJ, INTJ, ITNJ it's
wow.
all over INFJ. So a lot of different personalities.
That's great. It's that's what makes a great team, is having lots of different personalities on board.
Looks like kind of an even mix between E and I personalities right now.
Oh, good. That's great. So digging into personality a little bit more, Carl Jung was really the first person who studied and came up with personality types. And his theory was not really introduced until the late 40s, early 50s. And he was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud. And I really find this interesting that personality isn't something in all of the years of human existence that wasn't really thought of and discovered until the late 40s and the 1950s. So I just find that really interesting that it's really a, in some ways, a new science and a new theory that's out there. So we're going to look at the 4 sets of opposites, and they're kind of like our left and our right hand. There are 8 different categories in different combinations that make up the 16 personality types on the Myers-Briggs test. And digging in a little deeper, I found out that Myers-Briggs is actually a mother-daughter team that worked closely with Carl Jung to develop that first personality test. And that test, that link that I sent you and the test that you took was actually the Myers-Briggs test. So our personality types indicate how we are most likely to deal with different situations, in which environments we feel the most comfortable. And understanding personality types provides a framework to better understand the differences in human behavior. I think one of the interesting things that Carl Jung found was that he believed that the preferences were innate. They're an inborn predisposition. He also recognized that our innate preferences interact and are shaped by our environmental influences. So things like what family you grew up in, what country you were raised in, where you went to school, your education, so maybe your religious background, can also affect your personality. But we're all born with that innate personality preference. So that kind of brings us to our nature versus nurture slide. And really, I put this in because Kathy asked me a question earlier this week or late last week, I can't remember, when we were talking about personalities, we were preparing for this presentation, and she just offhandedly asked me, who in your family do you have a personality that, that's most alike? And I really had to think about it. And, I said, I really think I have my dad's personality. Not really something I had thought about before. But when I dug into it, when you get into that whole nature versus nurture part of this, is that, both nature and nurture play a role in personality. And they did this study in Minnesota on twins. And they did 350 pairs of twins between 1979 and 1999. Participants included identical and fraternal twins and those that were raised in different homes, that were separated at birth. And they realized that with these twins, that most of them, over 50% of the twins, had very similar personality types, whether they had been raised in the same home or whether they hadn't. So I really found that fascinating, that so much of our personality is inherited and we're hardwired with that from the beginning. And I found different studies that showed different percentages, and I just put it up there, and I know that's a huge gap, 50 to 20%, but it just does show that personality is inherited. So think about that question that Kathy asked me, and you don't have to chat that in, but maybe you've never really thought about it, but think about who in your family do you have a personality the most alike. So with personality, there are, now it's kind of become big business. There are lots of different assessments out there. As I said earlier, we use the Myers-Briggs. It's the oldest. It's also free. There's lots of different options. There's the DISC, there's True Colors, where you figure out what you are. The Big Five personality traits is another one. And then this was a new one, this 16 personalities. I just learned about that one recently. And I thought it was great, and it's free. And I would encourage you, if you want to dig more into personalities, and if you want your team that you're supervising to maybe take a personality assessment, each of them, I really like that 16 personalities. It breaks it down a little bit further, and it gives you a whole lot of description about each personality type. And the website is just 16personalities.com. It's a pretty easy test, takes about maybe 5-10 minutes, something like that. So the value of understanding your personality preferences and types. And some of you may be sitting there thinking, why do I need to know this? Why is this important? I'm a supervisor, I have tasks, but self-awareness and understanding who you are goes a long way as you lead your team and developing your skills as a supervisor. So we really want to understand our personality types so that we can learn about ourselves and our particular innate preferences, to understand why certain areas of our life come easily to us and others don't. And other things are more of a struggle, and we all know we have those areas of our life. To improve self-awareness, greater self-awareness leads to better self-management and working relationships, and to enhance your effectiveness as a leader. I mean, that's really the bottom line for this training, is to really be a better supervisor, to understand the most effective way to communicate with others and how others function best. I think it's pretty important for you to know how to communicate with your team, but it's also important for you to know how to communicate with those that are above you. And what is it that's going to speak to them? If you know their personality type, you know how to approach them with information and how to get what you want. So to understand areas that are potential conflict, we want to nip those in the bud if we can, and to appreciate different approaches to work and life, and understand the value that each brings to the team. And I can't say that enough. We have to understand that each person on the team is valuable and has a place on the team, and we cannot have a whole team full of the same personality. So it's the combination of basic preferences from the 16 different personality types. Typically, people will not fall strictly into one category or another. I think with the Myers-Briggs, it gives you percentages and tells you how extroverted and how introverted you are. Each type will function in all of the categories on some level on a daily basis. And most of us develop the ability to function well in areas that are not native to our basic personality. I mean, we know how, we figure out how to do it. When it comes to the broad dominant traits, like if you're extroverted or introverted, there can be change through your life, but honestly, from everything that I've read, those traits changes will be very subtle. And I will tell you that with me, every time that I've taken the Myers-Briggs, usually I think the highest I ever was 98% extroverted. And this time when I took it, it was like 85% extroverted. So there could be those subtle changes, but the chances of me waking up one day and being extremely introverted are probably not going to happen. And really be careful not to put people into boxes. We can all function in the different personality types, And as I said earlier, every personality type brings value to your team. So let's get into it and look really at the personality types, the introverts versus the extroverts. If we were doing this live, this is where I would have you go on each side of the room and break off into groups. And I have the dueling gloves up here, the fighting gloves up here. And, in some ways it is. There's conflict that arises between the different personality types. So let's look at extroverts versus introverts. It's really about the flow of energy and how we get energized, how we receive that essential stimulation. Do we get it from ourselves, from internally and being introverted, or do we get it from external sources and being extroverted? I can tell you, extroverts, one of the things that we like to do is when anything happens, whether it's good or bad, we want to talk about it. We want to share it. We want to tell everyone about it or process it through sharing it with others. Introverted folks want to shut that down, think about it first before they ever share it. So it's really about that whole flow of energy and how do you get excited. So I love this picture at the top because I think this is a great example. The extrovert is like, oh, I'm staying in tonight. The introvert's like, I'm staying in tonight. And I have a dear friend, and we are exact opposites when it comes to that. She loves to stay in. I'm like, oh, I've got to stay in again. So quarantine's tough for me. It's tough on us extroverts. Extroverts, the natural focus of the world is extroverted. It's outside ourselves. If you see this little picture down here, you've got all the little animals jumping around. You're focused outside yourself. Introverts are very much focused inside, internally. They're processing everything internally. So extroverts are attracted to the outer world of people and events. You're aware of who, what, and what is around you. You enjoy meeting people and talking. You're friendly. You have great verbal skills. You tend to speak easily. And you tend to often speak out at meetings. And maybe sometimes you have to hold your hand down not to be the focus of the meeting. And you may not be aware of what's going on inside of ourselves because you're so focused on the outside world. Introverts are attracted to the inner world of thoughts, are usually very aware of their inner reactions, are often quiet at meetings and seem uninvolved, are reserved and harder to get to know, and may not be aware of the outer world around them because they're so focused inside. So, extroverts are kind of the life of the party. They like being around people. They act and then maybe reflect. Introverts think things through. They reflect and then they may act. They want to think it through first. So the next group is that sensing versus that intuitive personality. And this really focuses on how we gather our data. And S versus the IN, it refers to how we take in information and what is our preferred way of absorbing that information. So do you really, do you have to see it, taste it, feel it before it's real to you? Or do you rely on that instinct, that gut feeling? I think that's a great word for an intuitive person, is you just have that feeling in your gut about things. So the sensing, as I said, it's your five senses. You have to hear it, feel it, taste it, smell it, see it before it's real. You're very present focused. You're in the here and the now. You want to be accurate with your details. You're literal and sequential. You would never start a 10-part book series at book number 5. You want to start at the beginning and you want to finish at the end. You trust only black and white facts. You're very much into give me the facts, tell me the numbers. You're sensing, see and collect facts and details, are practical and realistic. As I said, start at the beginning, take one step at a time. They live in the present, dealing with the here and now. So this I love because this is the best quote I have for an intuitive person. It's, I don't trust words, I trust vibes. People can tell you anything, but vibes tell you everything. So the intuitive person really works on their gut. They see patterns, possibilities, connections, meanings, and information. They're conceptual and abstract. They start anywhere and may leap over basic steps, but they just want to get in and get it done. They speak and write in general, metaphorical terms, and they live in the future of possibilities. And they prefer imagination sometimes to reality. So, I think a great story, and Kathy and I learned this at our nurse preceptor training that we have done for years, between a sensing and an intuitive nurse, was one of the nurses told this story that, on paper, they had a patient that looked good. All their vitals were good. There wasn't anything that was showing up as alarming. But this one nurse that really had that gut feeling just felt like it wasn't adding up and that things weren't, that the patient really wasn't as good as she looked on paper, and ended up the patient coded, but because that nurse really kept an eye on her, things worked out. But if you were just focusing on the sensing, you wouldn't have paid that extra detail to that patient. So it just shows you need both. You need both those people that are sensing and both those people that are intuitive. So thinking versus feeling, this is pretty clear cut. This is how you make your decisions. And it refers to whether you're prone to decide things based on logic, objective consideration, that thinking part, or if you have a personal subjective value system, more that feeling part. And you're thinking, you decide with one's head using logic and facts, or you decide with one's heart by following your personal convictions. And I'll just share this really quick story too. When I said earlier, Kathy asked me, whose personality are you more like? And when I told her that I thought I was more like my dad, she said, yeah, but he's a banker. He was a banker. And I don't see that as your personality type. And I'm like, well, he really didn't want to be a banker. He was more of the feeling type. And so he took his banking job and made it more of a mission and found a way to help people that needed help in, when it came to money and financial help. So you can really, you could see where your thinking versus your feeling comes into play. So thinking, you use that logic and you analyze the problems, you assess the pros and the cons. You focus on the facts and the principles. You're good at analyzing the whole situation. You focus on problems and tasks, not relationships. You may overlook the personal impact of the decision and their emotions of others when you make those decisions. Feelings. You use those personal values to understand the situation. You focus on the values of the group or the organization, are good at understanding people and their viewpoints. And you concentrate more on that relationship and harmony. When you come from that feeling side, those relationships are very important to you. So judging versus perceiving. So here's a great example of how much structure do you need in your life? Do you need everything very organized, very structured, or are you a little more loose? I would say the person on the left is very loose with their desk there. So judging. You like to make plans and you like to follow them. You like to get things settled and finish. You like clear limits, handle deadlines, time, and you handle time limits comfortably, and you plan ahead. You're one of those, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail people. Perceiving, you like to respond resourcefully to changing situations. You like to leave things open, gather more information. You like environments that are flexible. You dislike rules and limits. And you may or may not like making decisions, even when pressed. You tend to think that there is plenty of time to do things, and you often have to rush to complete. So those perceiving people are the people that if you give them, a deadline of Friday, it is going to be screaming in Friday morning or Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. It is not going to probably be there on Wednesday afternoon. So judging, you like a decisive, orderly, and planned life. You like those ducks in a row. You like a life full of structure, order, and organization. Perceiving folks are spontaneous, flexible, adaptable with life. They can jump in when things go wrong because they're more spontaneous. They like a life full of open options and last minute decisions. They can make the change easily. So this is just, I like little cartoons, putting in, from now on, all teams will be formed on the basis of Myers-Briggs personality types. If you do not have a personality, one will be assigned to you by human resources. And then we need a quiet, dumb guy to pair with an extroverted thinker. Now, I do not suggest that teams be formed this way, but you certainly can look at the team members that you have and that you are working with and make some decisions about who's going to handle what project based on their personality type. So how do we really change the fighting gloves to the loving gloves? Because I know if I had you guys standing on one side of the room across from each other in a live presentation, you would all be looking at each other and going, oh, and that's why they drive me insane when you're looking at the different personality types. So how do we really understand and make it a more loving than a fighting situation? So here are just a few tips to think about. Find out how people work and adapt accordingly. Really, as the supervisor, find out how the people on your team are working. Find out the different personality types and really try to adapt things accordingly. And everything is not a battle. You can let go of a lot. You don't have to have a battle over everything. And realize that we're all in this together. We're all about, as supervisors and as your team, we're all about creating the best quality healthcare. And we're all in this together. And there may be different ways and different approaches to reach the same objective. And don't take things to heart and too personally. We're going to talk a little bit about that next with emotional intelligence. And I think sometimes we can get our emotions all involved and take things way too personally. And then always respect, respecting everyone involved, understanding it takes all types of personalities to make up the team. I mean, as Aretha Franklin would say, RESPECT is the key. You have to respect one another. So I had sent out a question and offered a $20 gift card for whoever answered about in the past, what situations have you had where working with individuals with different personalities went well, and then when different personalities didn't go so well. And Charlotte Cooper from Clay County Hospital is the winner. And I'm not going to read all of it, but I'll just share a little bit of her story. She said that when she worked in med surge, the other nurse that she was usually scheduled with was an outgoing, lively personality. And she said she really liked working with her, and she was fun and upbeat and would pay and pull the attention away from her. She said she didn't want to be the center of attention, and this coworker helped pull the attention away from her. So that went really well. And then she told a story where in a situation with a patient, that the patient had done something that had caused the coworker to really laugh and get tickled, but not in a laughing with someone, but laughing at someone way. And that situation didn't go well. She really had to have that conversation about that's not appropriate to ever laugh at a patient in front of them. And so I really appreciate, Charlotte, I really appreciate you sharing that with us, and sharing your story. That really was great. So be thinking about that. I mean, think about that in your own situations. When have there been times when working with people with different personalities went well, and when it didn't? And then Zachary Heward from Rochelle just mentioned in an email, and I thought this was really important. It's important to include different personalities in your project teams. Following problem-solving formats, defining roles, dealing with conflict openly, and focusing on agreed upon team goals are all steps that can help help successfully work through the storming stages. So I really appreciate both of you for giving us information, and you both will be receiving an Amazon gift card for participating. We appreciate that. So Leonardo da Vinci said one can have no smaller or greater mastery than the mastery of oneself. And some people weave burlap into the fabric of our lives, and some weave gold thread, but both contribute to make the whole picture beautiful. So really that is personalities in a nutshell. I encourage you to read and learn more about it. As I said last week, each of these topics could be a full course. We're just, doing the highlights and, looking just kind of at the surface of each of these topics. So I'm going to take a drink, and then we're going to talk just for a little bit about emotional intelligence. So I don't know if many of you have read much about emotional intelligence. It's kind of a newer topic, and really a lot of HR people are looking at emotional intelligence as well as the regular cognitive intelligence in hiring. And it's one of those things that's kind of a buzzword in a new way of looking at things, but really looking at those emotions and being able to manage those emotions. So today we're going to look at emotional intelligence, describe it, and describe the use of emotional intelligence in the workplace. So what is emotional intelligence? It's the capacity to effectively perceive, express, understand, and manage your emotions and the emotions of others in a positive way. It's recognition of emotional states in oneself and in others. And it's the knowledge of how emotions function in self and others. It's really a being aware, awake, alert, responsive. Emotional intelligence is neither positive or negative, but can facilitate interpersonal behaviors for achieving your goals. So it's really about being self-aware, being conscious of the energy behind your words and your interactions. It assists you to effectively managing your emotions, and it promotes successful interpersonal relationships. So personality, as we just talked about, is a big part of emotional intelligence. And honestly, personality and emotional intelligence work together. And understanding personality traits and styles can help you understand the reactions of others. So, really digging into those personality traits. So, the next thing, and we talked about this with personality types already, remembering that there's no right or wrong personality type. And then this, if there's really one key message with emotional intelligence, I love this, and this I learned from a speaker several years ago. You need to learn to forgive others for not being you. And what I mean by that when it comes to emotional intelligence is that you need to be able to understand that everyone is going to approach the situation differently. If you delegate work, you need to understand that people are going to do it in their own way. And you have to forgive them for not doing it the way that you would. So, really, forgiving others for not being you is kind of a great definition of emotional intelligence. So, accommodating someone who works differently than you do or has a different personality type, it requires restraint and patience. It's much easier to just assume that you simply can't work together or to pretend that the problem class doesn't exist. And I think that's what we do most of the time, is that we just pretend that those things don't exist. You'll get better results, however, if you learn how to identify and manage the genuine distinctions between you and your coworkers. And emotional intelligence is really all about managing those differences. Positive interpersonal relationships are the key to the best of what life has to offer. And it really is. And your ability to understand yourself and others is what gets you there and what makes you a great supervisor. So, qualities of an emotionally intelligent person is that they gracefully accept defeat. Nobody likes to lose, but you gracefully accept defeat. You show empathy for others. You understand where a person's coming from. It's not sympathy. You're walking in their shoes. You show empathy for them. You agree instead of argue when there's no hope for agreement. And an emotionally intelligent person understands that it's better to lose an argument than to lose a friend or to lose an employee. You act instead of react. So you're not doing reactive behavior as an emotionally intelligent person. You're patient. You use self-control. You have the ability to deal with sarcasm humorously and not negatively. And then emotionally intelligent people tend to have a great social presence, and they're they're the life of the party, and they're liked by their coworkers and their family and friends alike. So how does emotional intelligence affect your behavior? Emotional intelligence means being in tune with your own emotions and your own emotional state. Emotional intelligence can be influenced by many things. You know, it can be influenced by traumatic experiences, personal stress, things that are going on in your life, work stress. You know, all of that plays into emotional intelligence and can influence it. And cognitive and emotional intelligence work together to determine our behaviors. So, how does emotional intelligence relate to being a great supervisor? It helps with team effectiveness, team harmony, team productivity. Emotional intelligence is at the core of great leadership. Exceptional leaders lead emotionally and from the heart. Consider that very rarely, if ever, do employees cite technical skills and abilities as attributes of a strong leader. And I think Andrew said very well last week that people don't leave the organization with staff turnover. Most of the time, people are leaving the leadership. So they're leaving the people. So leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of the people that you are in, that are in your charge. So let's get into it. You have the brain's know system. And the brain's know system is when you're just going along, you're on that high road, you're at the center of knowledge, you have slow memory recall, you're handling those situations, you're logical, you have wisdom, you have applications of lessons learned in the past, you're applying it to the situation now. You're the center of deliberate practice when you're in that know system in your brain. And then there's the go system. And we all know that there have been times where we've acted out of that whole go system. And really, that's that low road. It's the center of emotions and quick reactions. It's fast memory recall, fast emotions driven to auto reactions. They cause you to act before you think. And it's the center of reactive behavior. And really, a lot of times that go system, it's when you feel yourself taking things extremely personally, or you think that it's against you as a person, that, you know, something happened. So low emotional intelligence behavior operating in that go system, you say and do things that make the problem worse. And you break down relationships, trust, and respect. You reinforce low emotional intelligence behavior patterns. And remember that no reaction to something is a reaction, if you understand what I'm saying. Not reacting to a situation shows the people that it is a reaction, and people pick up on that. So those are really your low emotional intelligence behaviors. So really, when you're talking about emotional intelligence, you're trying to figure out how to reboot from that go system to the know system. You know, when a situation happens and you have that emotional feeling, how do you automatically reboot to that center of higher knowledge, to, you know, to really to that know system? And some things to remember: it has to happen during real-time reactions. You know, unfortunately, you don't get to go back and say, well, if I would have handled that situation differently, I would have said this. It has to happen in real-time reaction. And it must be part of deliberate practice. It doesn't happen easy. You really have to, you know, really work on it. It's a skill you have to hone, you have to think about, you have to practice. And there are times when you just have to, you know, say to yourself, I'm going to use my emotional intelligence skills. I'm going to use them. I'm not going to have an emotional reaction. It requires active use of those emotional intelligence skills. And those are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And I think sometimes when situations happen, that one thing to get us to reboot and to keep going is to keep asking questions and really always ask that next question. Keep digging, keep asking those questions as to why. And then you find out that it isn't personal, that it isn't something that's directed just to you if you keep digging and getting to the root of what's going on. So self-awareness strategies, quit reading your feelings as good or bad, lean into the discomfort. Stop and ask yourself why you do the things that you do and watch yourself like a hawk. I mean, there are certain things that I know that I have emotional triggers and I really have to watch myself sometimes. Get to know yourself under stress and visit your values. And I think probably in 2020, we've all had to visit our values and really get down to the root cause of things. Self-management strategies. Make your goals public. And I love the next one. I think sometimes when emotional situations happen, you have to sleep on it. And you have to smile and laugh more and visualize yourself succeeding and accept that change is just around the corner. So those social awareness strategies, greet people by name, watch body language, understand the rules of the culture game, plan ahead for social gatherings, especially if you're introverted, plan ahead for what you're going to do. Practice the art of listening and step into others' shoes. In relationship management, you need to be open and curious, avoid giving mixed signals, take feedback well. I mean, Kathy's going to talk a lot about feedback next week. Take that well. When you care, show it. It's always important to show that you care. Acknowledge the others people's feelings, build trust, and as Andrew said last week, tackle those tough conversations. I know those crucial, tough conversations are not something that we all want to do, but it's so important to manage those relationships. So I love this, practice the pause. I think that it's a perfect thing that goes along with emotional intelligence and really reminds you to pause sometimes before you say something, pause before assuming, pause before accusing, pause whenever you're about to react harshly, and you'll avoid doing and saying things that you will later regret. So remember to practice the pause. And I think, it's important too to identify and neutralize those triggers. Anticipate those events that are going to put you into have an emotional reaction. Plan ahead, think about it, and try to neutralize those triggers, whether it's time pressures, whether it's certain people that are going to be triggers. Really be intentional in thinking about what those things are. And then I love these questions, and you can think about these. And if you're brave enough, you can ask the people that you supervise. Take a personal inventory. Ask yourself, how well do I redirect my own negative attitudes? How well do I work with others? Demonstrate empathy for my patients or coworkers. Do I have emotional control over myself? So think about those and answer those questions as a personal inventory. And then this as if reframing. And, this is really a simple thing. And I've used this a lot. When you're approaching a situation and you're feeling those emotions, approach the situation as if everything will turn out fine. And it's just that simple. It's going to turn out fine. The other person has good intentions, is not a jerk. cares about my opinions, ideas, and feelings. So even if you're not sure if they do, approach it as if they do. So skills for the as if reframe. On your go system, you're going to blame, criticize, have mocking and anger. On the no system, you're going to do that as if reframe. You're going to look for the person's remarks as if there's positive intent behind it, and then search for the positive intent. And then these are just some skills that you can use to increase your emotional intelligence. Make statements of fact, ask questions. I said earlier, ask the next question. Ask lots of questions to make sure that you clarify. Tell the facts of the situation as you see it, and explain the general outcome you'd like to see, but not specifically what you want for yourself. And ask fact-based questions. Ask that who, what, where, when, why, how, so that you know. There are some assessments. We did the personality assessment with Myers-Briggs. There aren't as many with emotional intelligence, but I will say that there is this emotional intelligence 2.0, and there's a book, and there's actually, if you go to their website, there is an assessment that you can take. I think that there's a fee. I think it's less than $20, but it might be something that you want to look at as for yourself and for your team that you're supervising. I just thought I would throw it out there. Emotional intelligence takes time. It takes practice. All of these things are deliberate. You have to spend time practicing these skills. You have to be willing to look at every situation from a new angle. And it can go a long way in fostering all relationships, whether they're personal or professional. And then Kathy and I really love Brene Brown. She's wonderful. I don't know if you've watched any of her videos or read any of her books, but I love this quote. She said, leaders must either invest a reasonable amount of time attending to fears and feelings, or squander an unreasonable amount of time trying to manage ineffective and unproductive behavior. So emotional intelligence is certainly important as a supervisor. And then this is just a picture that I actually found on Facebook. If a child can do advanced math, speak 3 languages, or receive top grades, but can't manage their emotions, practice conflict resolution, or handle stress, none of that other stuff is really going to matter. And that's the same way with employees too. They can be the best employee in the world, but if they can't manage some of the emotional things, it really doesn't matter. So key takeaways: forgive others for not being you. It all begins with self-awareness, that whole as if reframe, and practice, practice, practice. Like your piano teacher told you when you're a kid, you got to practice these skills. And then this is just a final quote. To develop emotional intelligence, we need to practice enlarging our inner passion at every moment. It doesn't matter what's going on in our world, even how we feel about ourselves in the moment. In fact, the best time to accomplish something may be when we least feel like trying, because the hopeless part of ourselves needs the light the most. And I think that 2020 is a time when we need the light the most. And so thoughts for 2021: in a world where you can be anything, be kind. And if I can leave you with any thought, it's just to be kind with one another and practice these skills with your staff, with your family, and all of your personal relationships.
Great job, Liz. That was excellent. And I think just what a great quote to end things with. I just love how emotional intelligence and understanding personalities really helps us understand each other and makes us all stronger and stronger teams. And I also love the quotes of forgiving people for not being you. And I think trying to practice that in the workplace is tough, but it's a skill we can all work on and practice. So great thoughts, great ideas here today, Liz. We will be rejoining you next week. And like Liz said, I'll be talking a lot about communication skills and feedback, and it ties in so nicely with everything Liz has talked about today. We'll be sending out today's recording later this afternoon. The evaluation will pop up at the end of today's webinar, so please take a time to fill that out. We'll also be emailing that evaluation link. And then finally, drum roll, our winner today is Greta Wetzel. So Greta,
Woo!
congratulations. Thanks for chatting in. And thanks to everyone for chatting in. Great discussion, great feedback along the way. And Greta, if you just want to chat in what your email is, you can just chat that into Liz. We'll get that gift certificate out to you. And thank you so much, Liz. Thank you for everybody for being on. We'll see you next week on the 15th, 11:30 that day again. So thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.